You were born limitless. You were taught limitation, and you now have the opportunity to return into that limitless nature of self and live in the purpose and value. So how do you get started? For you to live in the value and in the purpose that you are meant to live in, how do you get started? And how to build the infrastructure so that you can begin a baseline and level up. The things that we do when we're younger, we could avoid should we have a better picture of where we're going, because there's no room for it. Hey everybody, Jeff here. Before we get started, if you're getting value from the podcast, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For those of you listening on podcast apps, don't forget to rate and review. Your support really helps the show reach more people, and for that, I am truly grateful. Now let's dive in. Hello and welcome to The Point. We're looking for feedback on name changes and evolving into the show that you want to hear and the show that you want to listen and participate to. So far, we're somewhere in the realm of calling this, having this show named something around the idea of designing strengths or quantum strengths, and leaning towards the quantum strengths ideations. The whole concept of this is that you get to walk into a spirit of intention, looking at the most special and wonderful ways that you choose to move towards getting things done in the world. You get to look at your approach and your unique design to your approach that's based on how you're wired and how that creates the perceptions you have, and design a life and a future, and design a vision and an understanding of what your purpose and where you're meant to go. And just like this show, if one of your obstacles to creating a vision is that you just don't know your purpose, let it be clear. Imagine being a year from now, you've done nothing to begin to attempt to learn what that purpose is or that vision is. You've done nothing intentional to move towards it because you don't know it yet. By not starting to be open, by not starting an expression of willingness and openness to learn, your ability to look at facts and understand the difference between whether or not you're making things up about those facts or really living within them, and understanding the difference between focusing on things that you can or cannot control. And the topic for today, really, you get to continue with me on this path of discussing change and having established the idea that change is simple. Change happens quickly, almost suddenly. And what takes time is the struggle that you have with it or the resistance that you have to it. The most of the answers to all of the questions has to do with lowering our resistance to accepting what is going on in and around us. If you can slow down and accept what's going on in and around you, and if you can have that awareness increase, stay at complete choice, have the freedom to use any strategy that exists to move forward towards the impact that you're meant to make, then you can begin to develop and listen and understand what the vision is for your life that's based on your beliefs and your understanding of where you're meant to be. One of the greatest resistance or barriers or comments that you've said to me around this idea of future is this trip around being in the moment. Well, I love thinking, great. I love having a goal or thinking about the future, but isn't life really about absorbing ourselves into the moment and being present in the moment? Isn't that the key and the idea? And I'm going to say yes, and. I'm going to say yes, and. I can be present in the moment and consider the desire that God has for me and the impact he has designed for me. You are uniquely and wonderfully made, and what makes you unique is your approach and your perception, how you approach getting things done. And based on that uniqueness of your approach and your perception, puts very specific people in the world that are meant to learn, grow, and be nurtured, taught, and given something from you to them. You're meant to be of service to someone based on your gifts and that is in your approach. Your ways of moving forward is perfect for someone else to receive. One of the biggest challenges that's going on in the world these days is that everybody seems to have a ton of value that they're offering for you to receive. They're all telling you what value they have and what power they have and what great offer they have, completely absent of any consideration of what you might receive and benefit from this value. So you're left in this position of evaluating all these different things based on something outside of you, rather than stopping and really looking at, well, what am I going to receive from this and how am I going to benefit? And all of the emotions and the relationships of negotiating that has you making decisions that are more about these moments and how your strategies are of keeping people happy and navigating the world in these bubbles and in a positive and healthy way, or in an angry way, or in whatever way it is that you show up in all of these different moments. That is what's happening with lacking the vision and the understanding of the larger goal. When you establish the vision and you understand your purpose and you put effort forward to be present and reach towards and set standards in your life that are about reaching these higher visions and standards that you were here for, that you were meant for you to do. When you step forward and do those things, many things that you're concerned about today become less of an issue. You've seen it in others that you notice are in a flow that seems like they just can't do anything wrong. Now, when you get to know someone like that, you'll notice that they're making mistakes all the time, but they're accepting the feedback from those mistakes. It's not about the failure or the mistake or the mishap. It's about the lesson and how you can move forward with a lesson. Right? When you know where you're going, you can easily and effortlessly have errors and mistakes happen because you can learn from that and apply that to where you're going. When you're missing the vision and you're staying in the moment, all you can do is sit in that moment of loss, mistake, misery, shame, embarrassment, rejection, whatever it is. But when you're going somewhere, when you need to sell 200 items and you need to talk to 2,000 people to sell those 200 items. Maybe you're even giving something away. And you know that if you talk to 2,000 people, those 200 items will be gone. And your goal is to get rid of the 200 items. You'll move as fast as you can to get to 2,000 people because you'll know that in the end that is done. That's what a vision will do for you. Stop with the momentary and the short-term pushes and passions and projects that get you excited for a minute that all of a sudden you end up unexcited for. You know, in the world of motivation 15, 20 years ago, there was so much drive to this idea of putting something physical, material in front of you that you wanted. And the idea was make it as big as you can. And I had a really good friend that desperately more than anything wanted one of these really cool, extravagant, amazing, Prevost diesel motor coaches with a barbecue that slid out, like this huge smoker system that slid out, and a patio that slid out on the other side, and satellites and all this stuff that was attached to this thing. And it was a very expensive venture. It was a big purchase. That was what was exciting. Well, what happened was that having that short term of a vision or a passion or of something you're trying to reach for, when it was done, they hit a depression and a sadness. And they were like, man, now I have to find something else that motivates me. They'd put so much effort into this thing that's temporary, this temporal thing that they were chasing, that once they got it, it was depression. And that speaks to the idea that if you're hoping that making a lot of money is going to make you better, make you happier, make you, anything, you're wrong. Being the most fit in the world is going to solve some problem for you. If that's your intention of moving forward, that's not what happens. We still have the opportunity to manage our own resourcefulness and make our own choices. So it's a little bit of a tangent for you, but it's relative because the idea is to have a huge overarching vision of your purpose and be able to be in the moment with that understanding. The other trick is to use that vision to bring into the moment the gratitude and the expression of success, and even an understanding and an existence of the problems you'll have in that persona, in the achievement of that larger vision, so that you can begin to think the way a person in that spot is going to think. I was talking to a high-level CEO of a major international organization whose comments were very clear, that they had no idea what was going to be in front of them, and that if they knew that becoming as successful as they were, that they were going to need armed guards, armed security at their home and with their family and taking their kids to school, they might have rethought what they were doing. Now, they also said they probably wouldn't trade it for anything because the vision was important. And the people's lives who changed based on the enterprise that they were in was important. The global impact that they felt like they were making was important. And it was an entire family vision at that point, because it had to be, because everyone was affected. He had no idea of what problems he would have once he got there. He also said that envisioning the challenges that he would have, which some of them were unseen, but envisioning the benefits in the world and all of the positive things that were going to happen were a significant part of what got them where they are. And had he considered some of the other downsides, he might have made different decisions along the way that would have put him in a better position to not need all of that, which could have had to do with land he was buying, properties and buildings and things that he was doing that would have provided more security, or even a community he might have invested in. And he was very clear on what he might have done differently in light of the situation that he was then in. We learn from those who have gone before us. And we learn as we've progressed and as change has happened so quickly. What we're finding is that we know so much more now than we did before. Times have passed where we had things like The Secret. We're now understanding we're just a piece of a much larger puzzle. And that some of our greats of the past, of history from long before, that were just working on faith, that were having amazing results, might have had a complete package and understanding of all of the parts that really matter to where we're going. So today we've created this relationship. You've created a relationship with change that is important for you to embrace and understand so that you can move forward and be in a space of facts and a space of reality with what change really is. Lose your resistance and step into the vision and purpose and person that you're meant to be. You were born limitless, you were taught limitation, and you now have the opportunity to return into that limitless nature of self and live in the purpose and value. So how do you get started? For you to live in the value and in the purpose that you are meant to live in, how do you get started? Well, last week we talked about the power of choice and the whole series of those cafe principles, and how to gain the awareness and build the infrastructure so that you can begin a baseline and level up. How to move away from this unintentional moving forward that ends up being the juggling ball scenario, right? I'm sure you've heard of that, where people say, man, I feel like I'm just juggling all these balls, or I'm spinning all these plates like someone in the circus, and I'm just trying to keep them all spinning. And it's a constant problem, and I have to keep working on every single one. That is an old mentality. That is an old way of thinking that does not have to be current anymore. And that is where we end up when we're not being intentional in setting an infrastructure. A lot of the things that we do when we're younger, we could avoid should we have a better picture of where we're going, because there's no room for it. A dear friend that really valued family and being a parent and being a husband, and his wife that really valued being a wife. They wanted to be connected partners to each other in life, and they knew they valued that. They knew that that was one of the most important values that they have. They didn't waste a lot of time going clubbing and doing all this other stuff because it didn't match the vision of where they wanted to go. And they had a very large vision of how many kids they wanted, what size house they wanted, what type of service they wanted to do in the world. they went after that and they did it. And there was no need to do a drug or to drink a certain way or to go to a certain club. There was no need to do all of those things because it didn't match the vision. Whereas other people that don't know their vision have no reason not to go do a lot of those things that end up creating the problems. And then we find the opportunities to do different things, and we just keep adding the plates. So when you have a vision, you can be intentional and you can create this baseline of values, this baseline of behaviors, this baseline of a foundation, right? Biblically, they talk about where we build a foundation. Is it on rock or is it on sand? And what does that mean? So when you build on that foundation of rock and it's stable, you're creating a baseline to move from. Everything in life has a baseline. If you're doing marketing and messaging for your business and your company, and you're not creating a baseline of the lowest cost possible to maintain a stable average rate of growth, and then having everything over that have a specific rate of return or return of investment, you're having a much different experience with marketing and messaging and getting the value of who you are out there than if you created this baseline to grow from. And it's an opportunity to save. Now, you can say that for any function of a company. You can look at that. What is the baseline we need to hit? And then what we do is we keep moving it up. You can say the same thing for yourself. What's my baseline of activity for physical fitness, for wellness, for my physical body? What's the baseline for my mental health that I want to maintain, that I will not go below? What are the practices and standards that I will keep that will maintain that baseline? What is my nutritional baseline? What is my financial baseline? How much money do you want to have in the bank that keeps you safe and secure from any type of problem that would happen? All right. What is the marital, relational, family, or connection I want to have in the world? Who are my people? And what's the baseline that I want to create and connect? As you create these baselines intentionally, if you know the large vision of where you're going, you can then just start moving up each area. And what happens is you end up in an entirely different framework of thought, and you continue to level up and allow the grace to shrink from, to retrace a little bit from the standard that you have set, and then just keep moving them all up. In that philosophy and in that process and belief system, you can also more readily consider, what's the one thing that I could do that would help all things elevate? What's the one thing I could focus on that would help all of these things improve? It's interesting, this call to action to become more intentional, this myself, and this call to action from you, the listeners, to speak specifically to you and become more clear of who you are and who it is that can benefit from this, is a step away from some of my natural fallbacks and instincts of wanting to be super inclusive for anybody. As you've asked for me to become more targeted and also be clear about beginning to understand more what you want to hear about, I noticed the difference of how that works. But one of the things that's benefiting this overall purpose is having a much bigger vision of where we're going, right? Having a much bigger vision of that we're speaking to you, the visionary. We're speaking to you, the person with a real dream and a goal that really has a picture or an understanding, an emotional or visceral vision and picture of what you want in life, that knows there's something better. Even if you can't see it specifically in the moment, you may be the person that's completely 100% right on the money, knowing that I want to have, X amount of resources available at this, 100 years from now. You may be someone that's working on even a bigger plan than that, of the legacy that you want to live, of being a power family. That's fantastic. You also could be the person that knows there's something a whole lot better, but is struggling to figure out the path along the way. In that world, we're all equal. We're all equal. And it's about taking your strengths and your gifts and figuring out how for you to move towards that vision of what you want. But the obstacle of living in the moment becomes a non-obstacle very quickly, because Living in the moment with intention will absolutely, you can stay completely connected and present. But living in the moment without any intention puts you in God knows any type of situation that could result in any type of outcome. And you can end up places that you otherwise wouldn't want to be. For all you parents, regardless of where you are in the zone of parenting, one of the ways that this is clearly designed, or clearly where this can be clearly understood, is in the thought of the vision you have for your children and the environment you want to create for them. And you will find many people in there that are now having their children, or many people that are experiencing the empty nest syndrome now, can easily see the difference in all of the things they ended up doing because of the obstacles that came along the way of wanting to raise their children well. So whether or not it was an obstacle that came from an opportunity that was created at the school or in any type of education, all kinds of things are going to happen in life that are unexpected. So if you're moving about life without an understanding of where you're going, those things can become huge obstacles and holdbacks that put you in an entirely different tangent and have you end up somewhere. So some of this is about protecting and anchoring the design of who you're meant to be and where you're wanting to go. A very specific mom that I know was really serious about wanting to make sure that her children received top-notch, high-level education. Her husband owned a company and ran a business that had a lot of physical moving parts to it, and he had to be there a lot of hours to make things happen. And the idea was to build this company and to create enough things to really have some financial independence and growth. And that wasn't happening because they valued putting a high-level education for their children. That altered the behavior of them to rather than, to do what they needed to do. And she took a job at the school that she wanted her kids to, that they wanted their kids to go to. She might not otherwise done that, but that way they were able to anchor in that decision. Now that's the decision that they made along the way. And had they been intentional and decided of where they wanted to go already, they might have entered a different business. He might have chosen a different business that had a different outcome that wasn't as labor intense and important that he physically be there all the time, and had a better financial result. When we're making a decision to create a vision and you're considering how that affects change, it really comes down to understanding how you will make decisions based on that vision. But if you don't make it real and you don't really paint the picture well and believe that that's really where you're going, this is critical that it's done with a level of authenticity. So don't shame yourself into thinking that because you don't have a 200-year goal or plan or understanding of where you're going, that this can't be done. Allow for the opportunity, allow for the space for that vision to come, and work towards the best understanding of it that you have. Maybe state and understand it through a prayer and meditation practice of what you think the impact of your life would be in that big of a time frame. Just the idea that you might sit there and not be able to discover or fathom or understand what that is okay. It doesn't mean the understanding won't come. But if you don't start the consideration, if you don't open yourself and be willing to have that show up for you, it will never show up. Open yourselves to the idea and then authentically pick the best time frame you can to start, and don't give up on creating a larger one. That way, when you go through a major transition in life, it's not as major because it's a small step on the way to a much bigger place. And the adjustment you might make or the decision that you might make to venture into something might change significantly based on that bigger understanding of where you're going. Someone who wants to live to 150 is going to treat their body, if you're serious about wanting to live to 150, you're going to treat your body differently than if you really don't know and don't care. Whether There's scientists today, there's doctors today stating that there are children born today that will live to at least 130 and be healthy doing it. If your mindset is one that says, oh my gosh, I don't want to live that long, what does that mean about marriage? What does that mean about everything else, right? Then this show's probably not for you because you're thinking about the limitation. You're thinking about what you don't like or what you don't want. Immediately upon the thought of living to 130, you're not wrapping your mind around the idea that that could even be healthy. You're not open to that possibility. All you're thinking about is how you frame that age because you've experienced something at a 60 or 70-year age of someone else that you don't want. That's how fast change is happening. If you're still living in a world where the average age of somebody is in their 70s, the average age is moving up consistently right now as you're listening to this. That's how fast change is happening. It's your choice to lower your resistance, accept and adjust and adapt, and create the highest vision for yourself that will allow you to sink into that change and make the decisions and the necessary adjustments to how you're living that will allow you to grow into that. I think it's a responsibility. I think it's a great responsibility of every individual to consider why you're here and what impact you're meant to make. Let's move on and jump into this new evolution of this show. And let's get really clear of how many of you are going to jump into the pool of wanting to create a massive vision, adapt and accept the idea of how awesomely fast and ready change happens, lose your resistance and upgrade and increase the way you're thinking. You don't have to catch up to AI. AI has to catch up with you. AI is still going to hallucinate. AI always has the possibility and opportunity to hallucinate and do something that's not quite right. So you upgrading your mind and getting ahead of that, that's a valuable next best thing you can do. So with that, I'm going to close out and say peace, love to all, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of The Point with me, Jeff Spikes. Please visit jeffspikes.com for everything you would need to know to engage with me offline. And lastly, thank you for your time, your attention, and your consideration. This is The Point.